Welcome to today's KM World webinar, brought to you by Capacity. I'm Mary D. Ojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc. I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled, How Websites and Chatbots Can Engage, Educate, and Recruit for Clinical Trials. Before we get started, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the Submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it within a few days. Plus, all viewers will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for viewing today's webinar. And now to introduce our speakers for today. Caroline Venezia, Capacity, Elizabeth D'Amato, Sightline Connect. And now, let me pass the event over to Elizabeth D'Amato, Sightline Connect. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mary D., for the introduction, and thank you for everyone who is taking the time to sit on today's webinar. And so through this presentation, we will be discussing how chatbots and websites can help the clinical trial industry to educate, engage, and recruit for individuals in clinical trials. We'll start by talking through what does that journey for a potential participant look like today for those that are trying to get involved as a part of the process. And as part of that, what challenges and obstacles are they facing? And ultimately, how is the industry and how are healthcare and pharmaceutical companies running clinical trials help to combat some of these obstacles with more innovative technologies and more patient-centric approaches, creating a relatable digital experience. And so we'll start by taking a look at the potential participant's journey to joining a clinical trial. And so to start this story, why do people join clinical trials? There are a number of reasons if we put ourselves in the patient's shoes on why someone might participate and engage themselves in a clinical trial journey. And so there was a survey that was done where there was two compelling statistics that stood out, really highlighting the interest in those that do engage, what that looks like, and to give a little bit more reason why. And so the first is that most people that join clinical trials, over 70% of those participants, actually joined because they wanted to improve their quality of life as their number one factor for joining in a study. The second is that of those remaining individuals that participate, 31%, the second majority of those individuals, are actually joining to help the future of patients, the future of trials, and ultimately to accelerate research. And so both of these situations are very similar, but really depending on where a patient is in their journey and what this might look like for them, they might have different reasons in partaking. And I think the beauty of this and what these statistics show is that there is an overall mindset of individuals who are interested in, one, being a part of clinical trials, and two, being a part of the clinical trial community and the clinical research community in and of itself. And so as we think about those that are engaged and try to take a look at how people begin this journey and those that are actually joining into clinical trials, what does that process look like and how does that start? And so I think if we take a look back at the many years of how individuals are joining in trials and getting engaged and learning about opportunities, one of the historical and traditional ways that individuals will engage into trials and learn about these opportunities is through their healthcare provider, their treating physician that is bringing these opportunities to them as a potential treatment option. And so this is still a part of people's day-to-day care and where they might be learning about opportunities. But what we've now started to see is individuals are more independent in going out and looking for clinical trials and trial opportunities, whether they're engaged as a part of community or even searching online to independently take control of what their treatment option might look like. And so what we found in the last couple of years is that over 40% of people now start to look for trial opportunities with an internet search, as much like we would do with anything else outside of maybe looking for trial opportunities. We've moved to a world where year on year the digital experience is becoming more relatable and relevant to individuals across their lives. And so why not look for trial opportunities in the same manner? And so we've seen a big shift on where people want to get their information. And this digitization of trials and trial information, many of us have probably start to see come to fruition over the last few years and become a more prominent for ways for individuals to engage in trials. This is something that I think we'll all see continue to grow. A great example of an acceleration of the digital approach is COVID-19. So over the last year and a half, I think we've all seen the familiarity of clinical trials amongst the general public, those that are more educated about why we would potentially join the research community. And we're moving to a point where people are looking for ways to get information online, and I think that will continue to grow as well. And of those individuals who are now using the digital channels to look for trial opportunities, over 92% of them, so a huge audience, is going through this internet search, and they would be very interested in sharing their contact details if someone could let them know that a trial opportunity that's available would be appropriate for them. And so now we have this large audience that are not only speaking to their doctors or not speaking to their doctors at all, and then going to use a general search in terms of owning this journey and their own treatment options. Some other relatable examples around this and maybe other areas outside of the clinical trial participation process and journey is, areas of nutrition or health and fitness, where we have adopted to applications and more digital-like environments because it's easier for us. We can get the information we need, and it's a more independent process for us. And so just to kind of highlight that this opportunity for us to create an approach that gives information that's more centric to how people kind of expect it today, kind of based on how this digital channel is growing. And so we have this interest amongst the community and individuals that are going to this new route. But what actually happens when people search for clinical trials? And so when someone starts their search, they will come with a results page, and there's a variety of different websites for which they can land on. There's a lot of different places that they can go. And what ends up happening is, not every website is intended for a patient or a caregiver. The educational information might not be there to kind of help at the beginning of that journey. Maybe the trial information itself is in very scientific terminology, so it's difficult to understand. And even if there is something that's interesting and someone feels they might want to participate, individuals are not always shared clear next steps on, how should I take this next step in my journey. And so I think, as a result of this, us as an industry, we have been looking for ways to make it easier to learn about trials. And those that are looking for trials have reported back that they do want it to be easier for them to learn, because now we do have that engagement. And one of the most common places that individuals will land is Clinicaltrialsgov, which we're all probably very familiar with and know that this was not built or intended for patients. And so when individuals land here, they expect to try to understand which of these trials might be the best fit for me, who would I contact, what should next steps look like, what is trial A versus B versus C, that all kind of look similar to me, what's going to be the best fit. And so what ends up happening is a pitfall of this is, this is not intended for a patient. And so we might, lose engagement and overwhelm patients that are initially engaged and want to participate. And as we all know, those that are wanting to be involved in the trial community, we want to create the most seamless experience that we can for them. to ensure that they're a part of our community moving forward. And we actually did an in-home patient interviews and surveys conducted by Trialsgov about 2 years ago, where we had individuals try to self-serve and go about looking at clinicaltrials.gov, look for a trial that might be a good fit for them. And they did share that feedback, that the medical terminology was a big one. It's not in lay language, everyday language that's easy to understand. And it's overwhelming, not something they would have expected to start their journey. And so I think there are some hoops for us and obstacles as an industry to kind of provide this information back. That's something that's more digestible, easier to navigate and guide down this journey. And so as we kind of think about this process on those that are engaged and starting their journey and becoming more independent and expecting this more, digital-like experience, how can we ensure that we are adapting and staying with that as the sponsors of the industry running these trials to help address that participant need? And it's simple to, build trials that have, build trial websites that have trials and trial information more accessible, and give this relatable digital experience that's part of the patient journey. So what we've started to see are sponsors creating and adapting common digital functionalities and experiences that we might be familiar with common websites that we might, purchase from or set up grocery shopping from, any different types of industry, to kind of bring that into the trial experience as a patient as well. And so what this looks like is creating a central hub of information around your trial portfolio with your trusted brands that has educational information to engage someone on, what are clinical trials? What does the experience look like, or the participation process? How does this actually apply to me and my diagnosis and my specific disease area? And allowing some functionality that it is, mastered the digital experience of easy to navigate, quick to find, to kind of take advantage of those that, want to kind of immerse themselves in this information in an easy and digestible way. And so when we take a step back to think about us like attending this webinar and listening to this conversation and clinical trials aside, when we think about how we use websites and where we get that information, there are a million different options out there to choose from, whether we're just doing day-to-day shopping, we're booking travel trips, or, we're buying other types of things as a consumer. But what we all predominantly have a few that we're going to use, whether it be Amazon for purchases or Kayak or Expedia for travel experiences. And when you think about, why we use these, it's really because they have mastered that digital experience that they're giving to us. They're making it easier for us as consumers to get exactly what we need very easily and very quickly. And it's designed to engage us and keep us coming back. And so as we think about a patient and their experience, like, why wouldn't they want the same thing as they're trying to find information? And so creating this relatable and simple experience will hopefully enable people to stay longer on your website and hopefully help the conversion rates of clinical trials when we're thinking about recruitment and even retention. And so the industry has begun to respond to this need, where sponsors are engaging patients in this digital-like approach. And, we're really honored to be sitting here on the Sightline Connect team to be a part of some of these groundbreaking websites that sponsors have built over the last few years to start to adopt these different technologies, whether it's the, Moderna's clinical trial website off their corporate site, AbbVie's Clinical Trial and Me, where they, set out a brand new website to have all this different educational content to engage individuals, EMD and Serono and Insight are a couple other examples of different types of sponsors across indications that are all applying the same relatable experience. And so you're seeing a lot of these different things adopted to make it very easy to kind of navigate through their website, be a part of the process, and then add their own unique branding and what they want to help individuals with as part of this process here. On the base of these websites, there are also repurposing functionality that people use today. So a lot of this is to help that actual search experience on top of like the content they're actually providing itself around the trial. A few examples of this, a Google-like search or a trial finder where people can come and search a variety of different terms, similar to what you might do with Google or Kayak, that comes up with relevant results that might be applicable to you. And so applying this smart or elastic-like search across an entire trial portfolio to kind of adopt that similar search-like feel across a variety of different studies. Another example is, incorporating Google Maps, where someone can interact with what are the different active site locations for each study. It's something that we probably use day to day every time we're traveling. So it's very easy for us to kind of navigate and feel familiar with this process. One of the more innovative technologies, which we'll dive into in the subsequent part of this presentation, are chatbots. Using and adopting this in the healthcare industry to provide a conversational-like approach to answering questions immediately, redirecting individuals to the places they're looking or trying to find very quickly, even matching themselves to a study based on what they're specifically looking for. And so I think, we all probably use the chatbot, whether we're booking a flight or trying to change our flight, or we're asking questions to our credit card company through the app. Again, these are experiences that are being used elsewhere, and it's relatable, and now they're being applied as an innovative approach to be more interactive and dynamic in the clinical trial participation world. And we'll kind of walk through an exciting application of what that looks like. Inevitably, there's other functionalities in terms of guiding an individual to next steps, providing clear call to action, where we can now, in real time, connect them to your active study sites. Even, provide a questionnaire for someone to pre-qualify to this study to see if they'd be a good fit. And integrating, a lot of us are part of different communities, so integrating the ability for someone to share the opportunities in their engaged communities they might have in their personal lives. And so really being able to provide this interactive, dynamic approach that's all encompassing of trial information is really a great way to for us as an industry to create that foundation for patients and caregivers to allow this more seamless experience for engaging, educating themselves on content and trial data, and ultimately helping with the recruitment process as well. And so of these technologies, we've seen that newer and innovative approach using Chatbot AI, which we'll dive into next, which has been a huge differentiator that we've seen into creating a more engaging patient experience and ultimately affecting enrollment rates in studies. And so from here, I'll conclude the first section of the presentation, and Mary B. will introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much. And now let me pass the event to Caroline Venezia, Capacity.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary Dee, and thank you, Liz, for that great information. So wanted to move into and provide some additional context on the chatbot and conversational AI technology that Liz had alluded to. So a couple of things that I want to cover in my portion of the conversation today. First is just really giving a high-level overview about how chatbots, how conversational AI is helping to really augment those clinical trial recruitment websites that Liz just spoke about, ideally improving the overall patient experience and helping with enrollment in these trials. The second portion of this I want to dig into is to share some case stories or a particular case story from our work with a major biotech company that's leading the charge in the fight against COVID-19. So giving some real-world examples of how we've seen clients apply this technology and the success that they've seen from that. And then I want to wrap up the conversation today sharing some demos. So being able to give you guys a real-world example, some demos of the user experience of how patients can engage with a chatbot to get answers to their questions and also show the experience from different audiences that might be engaging on these sites, whether it's a researcher, an HCP, who are looking for information, and how conversational AI, how chatbot can assist with that. But to start out, really digging into conversational AI solutions and how we can apply those technologies to these clinical trial recruitment websites. Liz gave a lot of great data in her portion of the presentation talking about patients wanting to be able to self-serve. They are very active in looking for trials now and being able to really take control of their own treatment experience. So once a sponsor has gone through the work of creating a clinical trial recruitment website, so getting all of their information located in one place and starting to drive traffic to that site, you're going to be attracting multiple audiences. Clearly, you're going to have prospective participants who are coming, who are looking for information, who have a lot of questions. If you think about that experience as a patient or a potential participant, there can be a lot of questions. It can be a confusing time to figure out what trials you're eligible for and to get the answers to that. So leveraging technology like chatbots or like conversational AI, we can create those engaging experiences where they're not just having to click through pages of a website to try to search for information. We can provide this chat interface where someone can go, they can conversationally ask questions, they can get immediate answers, and really be able to get the support and the comfort that they need to move to the next stage in that journey, to start the enrollment process. So FAQs, getting answers to common questions that patients or participants have when they come to the site is one big use case. Another, you have other audiences, as I mentioned before. You have HCPs, you have researchers who may be interested in being investigator. So being able to provide tailored experiences to the different audiences who are coming to the website is another big advantage to using conversational AI. And then, if you think about the technology, and Liz mentioned this before as well, there's a lot of functionality that people are used to using in other day-to-day tasks that they're completing. You go to your credit card website, you go to a travel website. Consumers are used to engaging with chat and being able to get immediate answers to their questions. So applying technology in a recruitment type experience is one great way to not only answer common questions, but also to engage them in a conversation. So talking about pre-screeners and being able to capture some information from these prospective participants to be able to gather that and direct them to the appropriate trial or to the information that they might be looking for, to give them that confidence and that comfort level to ultimately register or enroll into a trial. So one thing I wanted to touch on is the purpose of this is truly to create that conversation. Websites are fundamentally a one-way interaction where someone's coming in, they're looking for information, they're clicking through different pages to try to find, the educational material, the information that they might be looking for. What the chatbot does is it really gives you that two-way communication where you'll start to notice the questions that people are asking into the bot. Because it is AI-powered, it is self-learning. So the great thing about this is as participants, as HCPs ask questions into the chat, the AI behind the scenes is learning from that. It's able to go get additional context, get additional information from the appropriate resources on the sponsor side to be able to continue to build out that knowledge base and provide just a really engaging interaction so that people, again, have that comfort level, have that confidence to move to the next stage in the process. So to help highlight this, what I wanted to do is to dig into a case story, and we've partnered with the Sightline team. They created a great clinical trial recruitment website for a major biotech company that, again, is leading the charge in the fight of COVID-19. And I think this is a great use case and case story to highlight because the last year has been a very unique experience for a lot of people where these clinical trials, especially with COVID-19, have come to the forefront in patients' minds, where we've seen this transformation of people kind of taking the charge and being able to go look for this information online and wanting to enroll in these trials. So being able to provide those resources in a digital format to get them the answers to their questions is an important part of this digital experience. So when we rolled out the website and the bot on that website, there was some great data for the first 12 weeks that we rolled out, in that we were able to answer thousands of questions. So not only were patients and HCPs and other audiences coming to the website and looking for information, they were interacting with the bot and they were getting answers to their questions immediately. They were able to self-serve, find the information, and ultimately what we saw in the data is that they were more likely to enroll in a trial if they interacted with that chatbot. In addition to that, if you start to think about the questions that people ask, and again, you're building a website and you're combining a variety of content that you're hoping is going to provide the information that people need when they come to the site, and you're doing your best to tailor that content. But inevitably, when people come and they ask questions, they're going to ask unexpected questions that weren't initially anticipated by the sponsor. So being able to capture that data on the back end on what types of questions are people asking. The most common question that we see coming through prospective participants is, are clinical trials safe? Which is something that ultimately we did expect. But you can start to get great data on what types of questions do people have when they come to the site? What types of questions do HCPs have when they come to the site? It gives us really good insight on what additional content do we need to add to augment that experience and make sure we're providing the information that people are looking for when they come to these experiences, and giving them that really tailored, great experience so that they're able, again, to move to the next stage in the process.
So I want to transition to a demo of the user experience for the bot, and really want to focus on two different audiences for this demo. So really looking at the participant or patient experience, as well as the HCP. As I mentioned before, there's multiple audiences coming to the clinical trial recruitment sites, and we want to ensure that the bot is able to provide a tailored experience for any audience who might have questions. So the Sightline team had pulled together this mock website for a clinical trial recruitment website. As a visitor, if you're coming to the site, again, you can navigate the site as you typically would, but in this case, there is a bot available in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. As a user, I have the ability to open this up, and you can see here everything is very customizable. So the Sightline team has created their Trialbot. Trialbot introduces itself. It's also able to have what we call a guided welcome message. So serve up some options that a user might be interested in based on who they are. So in this case, I'm interested to learn about clinical trials, or I'm an HCP. I have the option to click into either of those, or I can just come in and type in whatever question that I might be looking for that day. So I'm going to wear the hat of a participant right now. So let's say I'm a participant coming to the site. As I mentioned before, one of the most common questions we see participants ask are just, are clinical trials safe? So when I start to type something in, what will happen is the AI is going to populate with the most common question that it receives. So in this case, as I start typing in you'll see our clinical trial safe pops up. I can click into that, and that Trialbot's going to come back and provide an immediate response to that question. And that's really the interaction we're trying to facilitate. Someone can ask a question, they can get a confident response, and they're able to move to the next stage of the process and find the information that they're looking for. One thing you'll also notice is that when Trialbot responds, you have the option as a user to give a thumbs up. So that's training the machine learning to match to that response more often, or a thumbs down, and we can customize that interaction to gather additional context to get the user the right piece of information they might be looking for. One other thing I wanted to show, as the participant is finding information, they're getting educational questions answered, maybe they're interested in actually joining a clinical trial. So in this case, I'm going to go in and say, hey, I'm looking to join a clinical trial. So if I'm looking to join a clinical trial, it's going to be able to go and help me with that process. As I ask that question, it's going to come back and it's going to ask me to confirm it's okay to ask a couple of questions to determine if I'm eligible. I'm going to say yes to that. And then one thing I want to mention is all of this is customizable. So depending on the information the sponsor wants to capture here, they can go ahead and ask for age range. They can ask for ethnicity. And then once they do, it says, great, it looks like you might be eligible to participate in a couple of clinical trials. Visit the following website to learn more. So actually linking them off to a page that's customized for them that includes all the clinical trials that they might be eligible for. The final example I want to show from a participant perspective is someone who might be interested in getting notifications about upcoming clinical trials. So building up a notification and alerting system is one of the very valuable use cases we see so that we can help sponsors match patients to a particular trial. So if I come in and say, hey, I would like to be being notified about upcoming clinical trials. Again, we're always going to confirm that it's okay to ask those users a couple of questions. Once we get that confirmation, in this case, we're going to ask them for their contact details, so their first and last name. In addition to that, we'll want to be able to get their email address so that we can send them appropriate communications. So provide that email address. And then we can gather some additional details from them to, again, figure out what clinical trials they might be eligible for. So we ask for, in this case, gender, birthday. We can ask for ethnicity, and be able to go and ask them for, again, their zip code so we can match them to clinical trials in their area. Which trials they might be eligible for. So again, I'm going to say vaccine oncology trials. And one final piece here that we always going to want to ask is, have they read the release consent and do they accept? I'm going to accept that. And we'll respond back in this case and say, hey, thanks for registering for notifications. Be on the lookout for an email confirming your registration. So in this case, we're going to automatically send an email notifying them that they've been registered, and then they will get regular notifications about upcoming studies that they may be eligible for. So again, from a participant perspective, really creating that conversational and engaging experience so people can ask questions, get answers. We can assist them with common processes. So ideally, they're more likely to enroll, register for trials in the future. I want to transition over to some HCP use cases. So again, we're serving multiple audiences here. So if I'm an HCP, like common FAQs we see, I'm a researcher, and I would like to request data on a study, being able to ask those questions into Trialbot here, get immediate answers, even linking them off to additional form bills to get the data they might be looking for. So getting them quick and easy answers to be able to self-serve. Another big use case we see from an HCP perspective is someone interested in becoming an investigator. So if I say, hey, I want to become an investigator, in this case, again, confirming it's okay to gather some information from them, asking them if there's a particular study they're interested in being an investigator for. If yes, we can find them information on that study. If no, let's help them find some studies they might be interested in becoming an investigator for. So oncology, metabolic, or therapeutic areas they're interested in. What is the name of their institution? All the necessary contact information that we need. So what is their name of the site investigator? And finally, how do we reach them? What's their email address? And again, all of this can be customized depending on the information the sponsor wants to gather here, but just showing the flexibility of the types of information that we're able to capture and how we can build out this custom interaction. And in this case, again, Trialbot responds, thanks them for their interest in participating, confirms that we'll be reaching out to the email they provided within 48 hours. Last example I want to show from an HCP standpoint is someone who's coming, they're a current investigator, and they want information on a current study. So if I come in and say, hey, I'm an investigator, and I have a question on a current study, and I have a question, let's get them an answer. First thing we're going to want to do, again, is just confirm that we can ask them some questions to confirm their investigator status. So yes, we're going to give them permission. We're going to want to know what's their first and last name. So gather that information from them. What's their phone number? And finally, what's their site ID number? Or what a unique identifier do you want them to provide in order to confirm that they are in fact an investigator? So we can gather that site ID number. Once we have all that information, we can go ahead and confirm that this user is in fact an investigator. In this case, we've confirmed that, and then we can go ahead and say, hey, we were able to confirm your investigator status. It looks like Dr. Tom Smith from our HCP support desk is available to chat with you. And then we can serve up two options to escalate this to Dr. Tom Smith. We can have him call them directly, or we can connect them via live chat. So in this case, I'm going to select call me, but if live chat was something enabled from a sponsor side, we could go ahead, we could connect them directly to Tom Smith via live chat in the same chat interstitial. If they'd prefer to be called and they select call, we already had captured that phone number in the conversation ahead of this. So we can go ahead and say, hey, thanks, Caroline. Dr. Smith will call you at this number in the next 5 minutes. So seamlessly escalating them from the AI to some expert on the sponsor side to be able to get their questions answered. So that's what I wanted to show from a demo perspective. Again, one thing that I want everyone to take away from this conversation is we provide these educational, conversational experiences, and two, that we can really customize and tailor these to really be whatever interactions that the sponsor wants to facilitate with the different audiences coming to the site. I'm going to transition back to the slide deck now.
Yeah, that's much better.
Sorry about that. So ideally, you would have seen the majority of the demo, but the purpose there was really to show whether it's a page or vision to side there to FAQ information on clinical trials, being able to actually go through the pre-screening process in a conversational format, or if it's an HCP, again, actually signing up to become an investigator, or if they are an investigator and have questions, being able to self-serve using the chatbot there. So one of the great things about the partnership with Sightline is that we have experience building out these interactions. We have experiences building out, these digital interactions that we know are engaging. We know that are going to be able to create these customized and tailored experiences for both audiences, so that they're able to get their questions answered. They're able to self-serve, and ideally, we're able to create these experiences that are going to increase enrollment, that are going to increase the number of investigators and physicians that the sponsors are working with, to ultimately improve the overall digital interaction. And now I can move to Mary D to start taking some questions.
Okay, great. We do have a number of questions here, but if you have a question, do put it into that Q&A box and click submit. So let me start here. How quickly can a chatbot be deployed on a website, and how quickly can a company start seeing results? I think that's yours, Caroline. Caroline? Caroline, unmute, please. Or Elizabeth, do you want to take that?
Sure. So we can defer if she joins us back in to talk through the concrete timeline. But really, this can be a very quick deployment of the application. The beauty of this is we would build the knowledge base very quickly of a set of questions there, and then ultimately we can go live in a matter of weeks. Over time, it will learn and we can customize it, but I think the beauty of this is the application is pretty quick to deploy on top of a website.
Okay. Here's one. This is probably for you, Liz. Are there specific disease areas where you see these applications for recruitment being adopted? I mean, is one more popular than another?
Yeah, that's a really great question. In our experience, I think that we have found this to be valuable across indications. So a lot of the screening self-serve technology we saw initially adopted across chronic conditions and things that individuals are more familiar with, actually being a little bit more self-serve organically. Over time, we've actually done a lot of work in other indications, two of the big ones being oncology and rare disease, because in these areas, the education is so important to engage not only potential participants, but as well as caregivers. And so giving that trust and validation on the application in more clinically complex studies has become something that we've done a lot more work in. So overall, I would say it has been adopted across therapeutic areas and diseases, and we're continuing to see new ones pop up in the sponsors that we've worked with.
Sounds like there was a bit of a learning process there on the part of the chatbot as you moved through the process of implementing it? Like more questions that you wanted it answered by the chatbot?
And this is Caroline. I can jump in. Yeah. So because this is an AI-powered chatbot, it is self-learning, which is just a great advantage in that we can work with the sponsors and we have a good sense of what information participants and HCPs are going to ask when they come to a site. But there's always going to be unique questions that come through. So we have great data on the back end to start to look at, what are the questions that we're seeing come through and making sure we are able to augment that content and continue to build out a knowledge base so that bots are satisfying those different questions that come through.
Okay, let me go back to the question that I asked originally here. Now that you're back, how quickly can a chatbot be deployed on a website, and how quickly can a company start seeing results? So maybe
we typically see the average time to get everything up and running is anywhere between 30 and 45 days. So we go through just that initial knowledge base build out where we're getting all of the content into the bot that we want it trained on. We're doing some testing, and then by either 30 or 45 days, we are rolling this out on a client site to ensure that, again, we're responding to questions, we're helping triage users. So 30 to 45 days tends to be the common time frame that we see to get this rolled out and to start seeing value and from a site visitor perspective.
We have another question here. Is this approach also compliant in countries outside of the U.S.?
So we are HIPAA.
You could go ahead and start with maybe the chatbot application, and then I could talk about maybe some of the other approaches that we're seeing.
Yeah, no. So from a HIPAA and GDPR compliant, capacity is followed all kind of attestations to be compliant in other geographies, and I can let Liz dig in and elaborate more on the Sightline side.
Great, thanks, Caroline. I think we've also seen the adoption of a global approach with many of the industry sponsors that we've seen deploy websites and some of those that we've worked with. And so as part of the strategy that it is compliant and to work in those manners as Caroline suggested. And then on top of that, we're coupling this with being able to localize that experience by adding in the ability to do translations and make this experience outside of the U.S. more applicable to those that might be visiting from other areas. So if you go to different websites, you might see a series of those that do maybe predominantly start in the U.S. and then they'll look to kind of as a phase 2 of their engagement strategy, start to localize that in other countries.
Interesting, yeah. So you have two things going on there, which is regulation and language.
Absolutely. I think those are two components to keep in mind because the language is part of this multilingual experience for the patient or the potential participant. So providing the best experience that we can for those that are going through this. Separate to that, ensuring that each region has their own, requirements that we have to ensure as we're rolling this out that we are adhering to. And so as the Sightline and capacity team will work to kind of handle some of that compliance, we can also work to deploy that public experience that's more focused on the patient's experience.
Okay, makes sense. Let's see here. What are some of the metrics you should be tracking to demonstrate the value of a chatbot to senior leadership? Sounds like a very practical question there.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. So we have a whole back-end kind of analytics portion of our system, and one thing we work closely with our clients on is looking at what metrics they're going to want to be able to track to gauge efficiency. So one of the biggest ones we look at is clearly just usage, how many questions are getting asked into the chatbot, so we know, are people asking questions? And then on top of that, what is the match rate? So based on the questions that users are asking, how often are they getting the accurate response to their question? So ultimately looking at 90% or above match rates to questions that users have. And then for those questions that the AI or the bot can't answer, that's where we're leveraging the self-learning AI to go find the appropriate answer and learn it for next time. So over time, we'll also look at knowledge-based growth. So is the bot able to answer more and more questions as users have interacted and asked more questions into it. So those are some key metrics we look at are, numbers, numbers of usage, match rate, how often are we matching the right response, and then starting to look into if a user's head is engaged in chat, if they've gone through a chat pre-screener, are they more likely to become, go from a referral to a randomization? So being able to start track some of those metrics and start to report those out from a client perspective.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, this is related, I guess. What happens when if a bot cannot answer a question? Imagine a bot cannot answer a question. My goodness. So, at what point does it escalate to a human? Or I'm assuming it does escalate to a human at some point.
Yeah, we definitely want to be able to have seamless escalation from the bot or the AI to some expert that's able to jump into the conversation and assist a user. And that can be customized. So ideally, a user's coming in, and what we tend to see is about now 90% of the time, users are getting their answers directly through the AI. So 90% of questions are answered autonomously through the bot. Mm-hmm. There are always going to be instances where maybe a user has a question that's, very customized or something that does require escalation. And in those cases, we have a back-end portal where we can escalate to the appropriate member of kind of the sponsor team to be able to pull someone into the conversation and be able to assist that participant, the HCP, whoever it might be. So being able to have that seamless escalation is a very important component of this, so that it's constantly learning how to address more and more questions for next time.
Does that happen real time, or how does the timing work on it?
There's options for both. So we have the ability to create what we would call a ticket, where someone can come in later and look at the ticket that were created, or we have live chat options, which if there's an HCP question and they want to get immediately connected to a physician on the sponsor side, we can use live chat to facilitate that, to go see who's available, pull them into the conversation. So just depending on the use case, depending on what type of experience the sponsor wants to facilitate, we can accommodate either.
Probably also depending on whether it's 3 in the morning or not.
Exactly. So availability is a big portion of that as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that chatbots don't care about, but humans do.
Exactly, yeah.
What about best practices? When would you use a bot, and when would you use a human?
Yeah, I think what our goal and what we would say is, if somebody's going to the website, they're obviously, or we can assume that they're looking to self-serve. They're ideally looking to get information and find answers to the questions on their own. So having that bot gives them that two-way communication where they can go, they can ask their questions, they can get their answers. We can also, if the bot can't answer a question, we can escalate, but we can also give users the option to escalate. So if they have found enough information, if they've done enough research on their own and they've asked enough questions, we can also say, would you like to get connected to someone on the side? So I would say our best practice is to kind of put that in the participant's or the HCP's hand to let them know when they want to escalate that or bring that to a member of the sponsor or client team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm assuming, based on some of your other answers to some of these other questions, that when you first put in a bot, you're likely to have a fewer percentage of questions being answered and more escalation to a human. But as it learns, your numbers, your percentages of answered questions by the bot are going to increase.
Absolutely, yes. Over time, the amount of questions that the bot's going to answer autonomously will grow pretty extensively as users engage and as it learns more and more. But there's always going to be instances or situations where someone does want to speak to a human member of the team. So we can build that type of experience in where we can enable live chat for clients who want to connect visitors to someone live if they get to that point in the conversation. But I would say definitely best practice is, putting that in the patient participant's hands and having them let you know when they're ready to talk to somebody.
Would that also affect this other question that we dealt with earlier? Would that affect some of these metrics that you're tracking to demonstrate value?
So I not necessarily. It's something that we would track separately. So again, if a
Okay.
user is opting in to speak to somebody, we would let you know how many users are opting in to actually connect with someone live on the sponsor side or the client side. So it's something that we would track metrics on a little bit differently, just to be able to give that visibility into what users are wanting that autonomous or self-serve experience, and what users ultimately want to connect to someone on the team.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, sure. What else have we got here? In your experience, are companies only applying this to patients, or have you seen it to be used more broadly to engage other groups involved in recruitment? I think you mentioned caregivers, also investigators or healthcare providers.
Yeah, we've seen this have very diverse applications. So, participants, patients are one of the main groups that we've seen this used for, but also, HCPs, physicians have questions and come to these sites to get those questions answered. Researchers, caregivers, there's a multitude of audiences that we can serve, and there's really no limit to that. So, sites have questions, various groups have questions. Being able to provide these experiences and tailor and customize the interactions in the bot to make sure we are really providing a unique experience for each of these individuals so that they can get their questions answered.
In the very beginning, you mentioned Clinicaltrialsgov and how different this experience is from that one. Maybe you could say a little bit more about that in terms of this question. Why would somebody? Well, why? Who goes to clinicaltrials.gov?
I think I could touch on that, and feel free to chime in with any comments there. I think a lot of people, a lot of clinical trial stakeholders go to clinicaltrials.gov, whether it's different advocacy or health communities, patients or caregivers, scientific audiences, healthcare providers, professionals, and you'll even start to have people that help with clinical trial recruitment rely on the data that sits there as well. That's all the stakeholders outside of, that it's from the FDA required to post different documents to that from a regulatory requirement. And so as a result of this, there's all the trials that are being posted there. But, while people will commonly land there, it's not going to be that interactive conversational experience, easy to find, the what are clinical trials and how does this specific one apply or match me to a specific one, and even next steps. And so you have this set in place for a variety of audiences, but for patients and the participation and trying to get those interactive support, this is really where creating that new experience comes into play to become relevant there.
Yeah, it would seem to me that the interactivity is really important because clinicaltrials.gov is static. It doesn't learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think, let me scroll down here. I don't see other questions, which is good because we don't have any time for questions anymore. So we do apologize if we were unable to get to all your questions. But as I stated earlier, all questions will be answered via email. And I would like to thank our speakers today, Caroline Venezia, Capacity, and Elizabeth D'Amato, Sightline Connect. If you would like to review this event or send it to a colleague, please use the same URL that you used for today's event. It will be archived for 90 days. Plus, you will receive an email with the URL to view the webinar once the archive is posted. And just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon card. The winner will be announced on October the 29th. We will reach out via email if you are selected as this month's winner. Thank you again for joining us.